No other ship in Legends has had a fall from grace quite like Iowa, and really unwarranted. LeBaire? Hounded by the nerf hammer. Boise? Definitely power crept. But what about Iowa? Welcome back to Legends with Derka. Since Iowa is pretty old by World of Warships standards and we keep hearing terms like shadow nerf being thrown around when talking about her, I thought we would do some testing to see how she stands up to the changes in Legends over the years, and all of the new ship additions, yada yada yada. Without further ado, let's go check Iowa out in 2022. A long time ago, at launch, there were three main navies in the game, and the culmination of their battleship tech tree lines ended with Iowa, Vanguard, and the Amagi. Iowa's clearly the most popular, and probably also the best. Yes, I remember pre-nerf Amagi. But anyways, more people as of late have complained that the Iowa was somehow shadow nerfed, or for lack of a more eloquent way to say it, she sucks now. Well, I'm here to say nay, my friends. Iowa is still a fantastic battleship and still worth grinding for if you don't have her already. We played around 8 games on Saturday, with 4 of them being over 150k. And that is saying a lot because I'm not much of a battleship player. Usually I find myself in other classes of ships. But today we're going to show 2 of the full games that we played over the weekend. Background while we go over the builds, the statistics of Iowa, how to play her, and why it might feel like she was nerfed. The 2 games in the background are going to be on Greece and Islands of Ice. Before we look at the stats and the gameplay though, let's check out our build. AA guns in slot 1, propulsion mod, target acquisition, and artillery plotting room in slot 4. The commander is Sims, of course, without cannoneer or drill bits. Inspirations are Cunningham and Juajard. Runner-ups could include D. Revel to lower that reload a little bit, maybe Madden as well, and to help with the turret traverse, or things to increase your tankiness if you find yourself dying a lot. Also, in the past, I have used Azerlane Scharnhorst on ships like this, as well as Alabama, Massachusetts, but I'm kind of just starting to think it's a bit redundant because you get artillery plotting room with American battleships, and that is an 11% dispersion buff. So let's touch on the stats really quickly, as there are a lot of new tier 7 battleships now to compete with. Please take statistic information with a grain of salt. Our builds are not identical on all of our ships. Health points wise, Iowa is still great, near the top of the pack, and has pretty good heals to boot. Port protection is not great, but it's not bad either, and her overall armor scheme can be moderately tanky if used correctly. Things to keep in mind here are a giant superstructure that can be farmed out. That is a huge detriment for sure. Not the best citadel protection, especially from the back, and you cannot flash your sides or you will be punished heavily. I guess that should go for really all battleships, but especially Iowa. Due to the longer reloads, DPM is not the greatest. That's your damage output. Now, some battleships in this lineup on the chart do have main battery mod 3, so it isn't a perfect comparison, but still just kind of gives a little bit of an overview. Now, AP penetration is somewhere Iowa shines. Let's check out this chart. Iowa really reigns supreme here. On the top, you can see here, Iowa, first place, and that would be Missouri as well. Amagi, Veneto, Massachusetts, and the other ships with the 45 caliber 16-inch guns. And then further down there, we have Vlad, Ritchie, Bismarck, and the Vanguard. AA rating, Iowa baby, best at the tier with 100 on my setup. Top speed, still very competitive, 30.9 knots. It's in the top 5 at the tier. Now where she struggles a little bit is a massive turning circle and a terrible rudder shift. So on paper, Iowa still looks pretty competitive. She has some great assets going for her, really. But how does she play? The better thing to say is how should she be best played? A bow in Iowa in reverse is as much a meme in World of Warships as anything. But this is not what Iowa's best at. Usually it's an indication of a new player who doesn't have a firm grasp on the game. An Iowa that uses her speed to spearhead assaults and flank is a very dangerous opponent indeed. At the very least, using your speed to get into good early defensive positions, like we do on Greece and Islands of Ice, is going to be the ticket to be most successful with her. Now, worth pointing out, immediate starting positioning at the beginning of a game in a battleship that is nearly 900 feet long is not easy. Unlike the PC version of the game, where ships have a spawn that is generally farther back, Legend spawn is a little closer, and the game timer is 5 minutes less. This makes for faster matches. But the consequence of this in a large battleship, Iowa included, you will sometimes have a hard time turning out and getting out to a flank without getting chunked for massive amounts of damage. Maps to be especially cautious about this on include Fault Line. Alright, let's take a look at how both games have progressed so far. On Islands of Ice, we immediately pushed out wide and got to one of the flanks. A lot of the red team likes to clump up in the middle of the map, and you can put them in a bind with a good crossfire from the sides. A red team on this one kind of had a little bit of a black hole strategy, as we call it in the biz, and it's something you don't want to be found on with your team. Also, it's something to not underestimate. I've actually seen it work a couple times. A red team will lemming train or bunch up to one side, and with that, they can put a lot of fire on a few of your enemy ships and can kind of overwhelm a flank or a specific part of the map. So be careful. Like in this game, it actually ends up being a pretty close one, even though the beginning looks like we're dominating. And let's go check back in on Greece. Here is a map that can really be decided by who wins a flank. Looking early at our team setup, it was apparent we needed a battleship out on the side to start putting pressure over there and to possibly push around and start eliminating players in the middle of the map. Now, in both cases, it's worth pointing out we eventually stopped pushing forward, at least for a little bit. On the ice map, we stopped long enough to clear out some ships, take some pot shots, and to really make sure I wasn't threatened by a lot of enemy ships shooting at me, and then we resumed pushing. Now on Greece, I ran into a lot of opposition over here. We had a Wichita, we did send him back to port already, but still out here in Ochakov, a Kansas, and now a Minotaur has found his way over here. On top of that, we lost one of our support ships, the Riga, leaving us really the sole target of opportunity for these small caliber spammers. And apparently the Kansas too, as he's kind of taken a liking to me. So as much as I would like to continue and be aggressive pushing over here, sometimes it's best just to stop, get into some cover for a little bit, give your damage cons time to cycle, and kind of reset. Once we are sure we can take on the remaining enemy ships, we start pushing again. On top of that, in this game on Greece right here, and the other one, Ice, I still have a decent amount of health, and tanking some damage for your team, especially in this case the Wusta, would allow them to move around more freely. Just keep an eye on that mini-map and on how many ships can engage you and whittle your health down, and that will help you decide how aggressive to be. Okay, let's let these games keep playing out here a little bit in the background, and we'll talk about why Iowa might seemingly have been forsaken by so many players. I am sure there has been some degree of power creep. I mean, just look at some of the newer ships like Weimar and the Mines and compare them to the original fire spammers like Charles Martel in Atlanta. Some of these newer ships are definitely stronger, so sure, power creep, to an extent, for Iowa. Now the next thing to note, why Iowa was so popular and so good at the beginning and maybe isn't as much now, are that when Iowa first came out and captains started sailing her, the game was very young. This was around spring 2019, and you could say that was the glory days for Iowa. For starters, not many players on the console version of the game were very good yet. Things like armor angling were definitely a new concept. Full 4.5% dispersion camos were very rare on ships. There was no such thing as permanent camos then, and things like dispersion commanders such as Vian were just beginning to get explored. And if you don't believe me, go watch a Legends video from early 2019 and see for yourself. It was very easy back then to have an absolute field day. Cruisers sailing around flat broadside, naked New Orleans, and Miyokos as far as the eye could see. It was very easy to paddle people and run lobbies with seemingly godlike accuracy. Now fast forward to now. And everywhere you look, there are people posting their stats, having logged 4, 5, 10,000 or more battles. Things like agile cruisers, incoming fire dispersion builds, and the like are far more prevalent. Player skill has increased dramatically. Lots more captains have a firm grasp on how to play the game, although sometimes I wonder if these players are only on red team, but it makes a big difference when it comes to battleship accuracy. These low DPM ships like Iowa that rely on devastating alpha strikes. Now sure, you might argue battleship builds have gotten better as well, higher level commanders and the like, but I for one imagine most people have about the same Iowa build now as they did in 2019, Sims and Cunningham for accuracy. The Iowa build really hasn't changed much, but on cruisers, the Iowa's main prey, it has changed dramatically. The last thing, maybe there's a bit of nostalgia. I mean, psychologically, it is proven that humans seem to remember things more favorably, and revisiting those things sometimes might leave you wondering, why did I like that so much? Or, why did I think that was so great? I'm sure that is something we've all experienced, and maybe that's a little bit beyond the scope of our gaming discussion today, but still something to consider. Alright, back to these two battles. Now, the ice game is not looking the best at the moment. We are currently down by 2 ships, and one of the enemies just happens to be a full health Akatsuki. While she's only a tier 6, it is a phenomenal torp boat, and it would have all the tools necessary to easily win this game of domination. Stealth, speed, lots of torpedoes, and there's no reason he would ever need to be spotted again, so this one's looking kind of rough. Now over on Greece, things are much more optimistic. Red team is without a doubt on the ropes. They have painted themselves into the corner of the map, and it shouldn't be long for a victory here. Of course, it does leave you wondering if you should have been a little more aggressive in both cases of the games, but there have been so many times that I've been hyper aggressive in a battleship and died, and you pay for it when your team flubs the ending after you die. It plays a lot into my playstyle of this game. I am a predominantly solo Legends player, and I often do my best to not rely on my team, so I try to preserve my health just in case you kind of have to pull out a carry. Now with that, the Minotaur finally dies, and I really don't have a lot to fear. Even if the Iowa focused me and the Kansas over here, I think that I could adequately tank them, so we're just going to push up, take some pot shots, and start working on this cap as this one gets wrapped up. So both of our examples involved pushing flanks, but that's not to say that you couldn't have played from the middle of the map in Iowa, and in my Montana video I kind of talked about that. I can link that in the description below. It's pretty much just battleship tips in general, even though most of it's for the Montana. A lot of it would relate to the Iowa as well. One of the more prominent PC players, his name is Flamu, and he likes to play his American battleships from the center of the map, and he makes some good points for doing that. You don't have to do fancy maneuvering, especially in slower American ships like American Standards or Kansas, and your long, accurate guns can reach across most of the map. The biggest deciding factor for me is usually what my friendly teammates are doing and where our other battleships position. So on Greece here, what if we hadn't pushed to this side? Well, Ochakov and Wichita would definitely have made it over to the cap and to island cover on this side of the map. They probably could have capped, and with the Kansas's help, they still would have killed the Riga, leaving Worcester all alone over here. They would have then had access to this entire side of the map. They could have pushed up, flanked our team, and so on and so forth. Or they could have just sat there and collected the points. If I had waited in the middle and later tried to push this side, the cruisers would have had the island cover to spam me, and we probably definitely would have lost this side. I mean, sure, our team might have still pulled out the victory, but it would have been a lot harder. So with that, that game's over. A respectful 3,500 base XP and 158k, which mostly came from pesky cruisers. Now let's go back to this match on Islands of Ice and see how it's going to wrap up. Thankfully, we have a smart teammate in the form of the nuisance. He's pretty low on health over there, but he understands our best chance of winning is on points and by capping. So he sails over to C cap and starts taking that cap while their Akatsuki takes A from us. We do have a slight points advantage, but it's not a lot. At this point, I really perceive the Wichita as being the biggest threat. He is spamming the G-Wagon from the middle of the map, and he's resetting the cap and has the possibility of really killing him, so that's why I sail into the middle here, so that we can get him out of the match. Also, sailing this direction, I'm trying to get away from the Akatsuki. But I don't want to concede B cap to these guys, and also I want to shelter the G-Wagon, the nuisance, from these guys pushing into the center and getting to him. Well, unfortunately, while we made that turn to the center, we took a pretty big shot from the North Carolina. And that's one of these bad things about the Iowa, as opposed to Alabama, Massachusetts. She does not have a tight turning circle, so you're not going to pull off crazy maneuvers like this. And we got slapped pretty hard. Now, deciding who to shoot next came down to knowing that North Carolina has a 25mm bow and that I could punch right through the center. Because we need him dead. It's very likely I'm gonna die, so I need his death to negate my death. Make up for my boneheaded push into the middle here. So hopefully with one more shot, we can overmatch that bow and get him out of the game. And then that should be enough to keep us into the fight and get us the points lead. So it kind of came down to this shot. Right through the front of the ship, we get the kill, and I was really surprised with 6,000 health that the KGV got me there. I wasn't sure where he was aiming. Maybe I still had some parts on my superstructure that weren't entirely saturated, possibly? I'm not sure. Overall, I hope you guys enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you'll take Iowa back out because she's still a fantastic ship. If you could do me a huge solid, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to subscribe to the channel for future content. Got plenty more World of Warships headed your way. This match turned out to be a pretty decent one as well, and again, I was surprised by how well we did for the day. We had a lot of fun games in Iowa. Anyways, I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.